Go ahead and get started. All right. Hello, board. Welcome. Welcome to the community. We're glad you're here. We're going to start with the pledge, which is right behind. The flag is right behind me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So board, if you have your mic, just remember to pull it forward because that is how we get our recording, is when we speak into the mic. So we're going to go ahead and begin. There have been some misunderstandings regarding public meetings, and there are just some things that we want to start with so that we're all under the same understanding. So all meetings the board conducts are public meetings with the exception of our executive sessions. There are three kinds of public meetings. There's public hearings, special meetings, and regular board meetings. Public participation in meetings which are advertised and designated by law as public hearings, the public shall be entitled to be heard. The other meetings of the board are conducted for the purpose of carrying out the business of our schools. They are not public hearings, but they're meetings held in public. Tonight's meeting, the December 18th meeting, has been advertised as a special meeting, and it's sometimes known as or called a work session, which is held in public. The board is not obligated by law to hear public comments in special meetings, since it is conducted for the board to gain information. However, because we do want to hear the input of the community, we choose to do it in a way to truly listen to the concerns of the people that will be meaningful and productive. Public announcements, not agendas of the meetings held in public, are the only requirement to hold a special meeting or any other board meeting. So thank you for being here tonight at our special meeting. And we want you to know that the way it's organized is truly because as a board, we want to learn, and we're glad that you're here for that journey with us.
Again, just thank you for being here this evening. We do appreciate you respecting our decision to allow us to learn together and listen to your concerns. We hope that many of the questions that have been coming our way are answered through the presentations and conversations this evening. Some of you will probably still have unanswered questions by the time you leave this evening, simply because we are all learning about this gender diversity right along with you. We will begin this evening with the legal aspects for our schools. And I'm going to introduce our two presenters, Mr. Mark France. He is the Manchester School Board Legal Counsel, and Ms. Lisa Townsell, who is the Indiana School Board Association Legal Counsel. She has many years' experience with school law, so I'll turn it over to them.
I don't know whose this is, but I'm going to close this. I hope it doesn't mess anything up. I apologize. I don't have slides for you, so you just have to hear or listen to me drone on. Can you hear me now? Everybody in the back? Okay. As Dr. Grimeau said, I am Mark France. I'm the school board's legal counsel. Just so you know a little bit about me, I grew up in North Manchester. I went through this system. My dad and grandfather both served on the school board. This is my way to serve on the school board as well, so please don't think I'm just some random attorney who's here to promote anything. And I want to make it very clear at the beginning, there are two things that are very important to this presentation. One, I am not expressing any viewpoint, any personal viewpoint from me or the board whether or not the case law that I am about to discuss is right or wrong. I'm not trying to call into question anybody's beliefs or say concerns of one group are more important than concerns of another group. This is purely for informational purposes, to address the relevant case law that is applicable in Indiana and to answer questions that we have been getting in letters, emails, and I have seen posted on social media. So that's the point of this presentation tonight. I also want to make it very clear that FERPA applies even to this meeting. And FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It protects the privacy of students and their education records. The definition of education records is very broad. It includes any information the school has or maintains on students. So when you ask for information about any one or group of students, we cannot give it to you. We are not allowed to give you that personally identifiable information or address behaviors or anything about individual students. So tonight, in discussing this presentation, I'm not going to discuss anything about any individual student or groups of students. And in the public comment section, I would ask everybody to keep that in mind as well, unless you are a parent of that student. So please do not identify anyone or call anybody out. That is not the point of this meeting. So to get into it, Title IX is probably why everybody is here and wants to know about. Title IX is a civil rights law, and it is very brief. And I'm going to read it to you right now. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. That's it. There are some exceptions in the statute, but that is the crux of Title IX. It is very common for civil rights laws to be brief like that, unlike statutes that are passed today that are long, complicated, and wordy. Because it is brief, that language is left up to interpretation. So there are regulations implementing Title IX. Those regulations include prohibiting any person from being subject to separate or different rules or behavior, sanctions, or other treatment. Those are also the regulations that allow for schools to maintain separate but comparable restrooms and locker rooms and separate sports teams. But even those regulations do not define what sex is as defined in Title IX, or I'm sorry, as used in Title IX, or the application to transgender students and bathroom or locker room access. So it's left up for interpretation. And there are two main ways for that to be interpreted. One is departmental guidance. Those are the Dear Colleague letters issued by the Obama administration and then withdrawn by the Trump administration. So in 2006, the Department of Education and Department of Justice together under the Obama administration issued guidance on how students' gender identities are to be, how the school should begin treating students consistent with their gender identities, including access to restrooms and locker rooms. Quite notably, that guidance was withdrawn very early in 2017 under the Trump administration. It has to be noted, though, that when the Trump administration withdrew that guidance under the Obama administration, it did not replace it with anything. It merely said, we are going to continue to comply with what Title IX requires. Now, the issuance of guidance and the withdrawal of guidance does not create or change law. Title IX stayed exactly how it was written. The application of that guidance is that courts will give it deference and controlling weight, but it is not determinative. It is very heavily used if a complaint is filed with the Department of Education, but that is a separate matter and we're not addressing that tonight. And applying it that way, only funding can be withdrawn. What we're talking about is case law that interprets the private right of action that someone has under Title IX to sue. So to get into the case law, that's the second area that interprets Title IX. That is a court decision issued by a judge or a panel of judges. There are two main cases that apply to Indiana. One is from the Seventh Circuit, one is from the Southern District of Indiana. And I want to state very clearly at the beginning that if anybody believes that a Seventh Circuit opinion does not apply to Indiana, you are dead wrong, and you are either ignoring or misunderstanding a very basic fundamental principle of the federal court system. So this law, it's the Whitaker case that I'm about to describe and tell you about. It applies in Indiana. Whether you agree with it or not, it applies. So in the Whitaker decision issued by the Seventh Circuit in 2017, the school had a transgender male student and a policy that allowed the transgender male student to only use the female restrooms or gender-neutral restrooms. It prohibited this student from using the male restrooms. So in that case, the student brought a lawsuit against the school alleging Title IX and Equal Protection Clause violations. The district court in Wisconsin issued a preliminary injunction against the school preventing that policy from being enforced and thus allowing the transgender student to use the restroom corresponding with that student's gender identity. So the school then appealed that decision to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. In addressing preliminary injunctions and whether or not they're going to be granted, one of the factors courts look at, and the only one that I'm going to address tonight, is the likelihood of success on the merits. So in analyzing the student's likelihood of success on the merits, the Seventh Circuit upheld that district court's preliminary injunction, preventing the school from prohibiting that student from accessing or being limited to the bathroom of the student's sex as defined at birth. In doing that, the Seventh Circuit used incredibly strong language, recognizing the right of transgender students to bring a claim of discrimination against the school under Title IX based on a sex stereotyping theory. That is where it's discrimination based on an individual not conforming to the sex-based stereotypes of the sex that the individual was assigned at birth. That theory, that sex stereotyping theory, was recognized in a U.S. Supreme Court case from 1989 called Price Waterhouse. That's where it recognized sex stereotyping in finding that a female employee adequately alleged that her employer discriminated against her in violation of Title VII for being too masculine. And I should explain that Title VII is the law that prohibits discrimination in employment. Title VII and Title IX are analyzed by federal courts very similarly. Basically, what will apply to one will apply to the other, as far as court opinions on ability to bring a claim. So under that guidance of the Supreme Court in Price Waterhouse, the Seventh Circuit held that by definition, a transgender individual does not conform to sex-based stereotypes of the sex that he or she was assigned at birth. Thus, it found the student could bring a claim under Title IX for discrimination and was likely to succeed on the merits under that. In arguing against that preliminary injunction, the school argued that its practice of preventing that student from using the male restroom was based on the biological characteristics of that student, not sex stereotyping, and that the school needed to protect the privacy rights of the other students. The Seventh Circuit did not find those arguments persuasive. And I'm going to read you one of the quotes from that opinion just so you understand how strong a language that the Seventh Circuit used in this opinion. A policy that requires an individual to use a bathroom that does not conform with his or her gender identity punishes that individual for his or her gender nonconformance, which in turn violates Title IX. The school district's policy also subjects the student as a transgender student to different rules, sanctions, and treatment than non-gender students in violation of Title IX. Providing a gender-neutral alternative is not sufficient to relieve the school district from liability, as it is the policy itself that violates the act. It's not clear what that requires, but it is clear what that prohibits. So we are still left to, what does that mean? How is that applied? And just to read you another quote from that same case, a transgender student's presence in the restroom provides no more of a risk to other students' privacy rights than the presence of an overly curious student of the same biological sex who decides to sneak glances at his or her classmates performing their bodily functions, or for that matter, any other student who uses the bathroom at the same time. Common sense tells us that the communal restroom is a place where individuals act in a discreet manner to protect their privacy, and those who have true privacy concerns are still able to utilize a stall. Again, not clear what it requires, but that's what the position that the Seventh Circuit took on the privacy concerns. So then 2 years later, we'll move on to the Southern District of Indiana case. That's a case brought against Evansville Vanderburg School Corporations. In that case, the school had a practice of preventing a transgender male student from using the male restrooms and locker rooms, but allowed the student to use the female restrooms and locker rooms or gender-neutral facilities. School also said that it would have allowed the transgender student to use the male restrooms if that student produced a birth certificate changing that student's sex from female to male. Student brought a lawsuit, just like in the Whitaker case, alleging violations of Title IX and equal protection. Again, I'm not addressing equal protection. Title IX is just the focus of this presentation. District Court granted a preliminary injunction against the school and found that the student had a likelihood of success on the merits based on the decision of the Seventh Circuit in Whitaker. The school, in argument against the preliminary injunction, argued that the Whitaker decision did not mandate to allow transgender students access to restrooms of their choosing, and that some medical or psychological showing was required from the student. But the district court called that argument irrelevant based on the evidence that was presented. The important part of this case is what's about to come. It's that the student later filed for what's called summary judgment. Summary judgment is a request for the court to decide the case as a matter of law when there is no question of material fact. It basically means the student said, "Judge, we know exactly what happened. You can decide this without a jury." Basically, the judge will look at the facts and say, here's what the law requires. And in that case, the school argued that Title IX's regulations allow for In that case, the school argued that the Title IX's regulations allow for the separate restrooms and locker room facilities, and that Congress could not have been said to have required transgender access to the other bathrooms. The district court, in addressing that argument, called it unavailing. The district court then granted summary judgment in favor of the student based on the Seventh Circuit decision in Whitaker, relying on a sex stereotyping claim. The court found that the school's policy required transgender students to use a bathroom that did not conform to their gender identity, which violates Title IX. Violation occurred regardless of whether the school knew that the student or any other student was affected by the policy. It's important, that part is important just because that was a case where the only thing the school knew was a student declaring they were transgender. There was no medical evidence provided. There was no diagnosis that they knew of. It was just a student saying, I am transgender, let me use this bathroom. And the court in Southern District of Indiana found that that policy prohibiting that student from accessing that male restroom violated Title IX as a matter of law. And then it left the question of damages to be decided by a jury. That's a scary proposition for me. I just know that in the Whitaker case, after that case decision, or that Seventh Circuit decision was made, that school settled for $800,000. So damages are there, and that's what's to be decided in that case. That case is still pending in the Southern District. It will probably be appealed, but we're tracking that. But those are the two cases in Indiana that provide the guidance to schools on how Title IX and transgender bathroom access is to be looked at. And they very strongly go against prohibiting the transgender student from accessing a restroom that conforms with their gender identity. In addition to those cases, it is important to look at cases from other circuits in the federal system. And I'm going to address a few of those very briefly for you so you understand the background of all that's going on. Because this is not unique to Indiana or the Seventh Circuit by any means. This is happening. This is an issue being addressed by courts all over the country. The most famous case is Grimm versus Gloucester. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that was out of the Fourth Circuit in 2016. That is where the district court denied a transgender student's right to sue under Title IX. The Fourth Circuit then came back and reversed that, saying, no, that student does have a right to sue. That case then went up to the Supreme Court, but that was at the time the Trump administration withdrew the Department of Education and Department of Justice guidance, and the Supreme Court punted and kicked it back to the Fourth Circuit and the district court to say, look, that guidance has been withdrawn, relook at this case. Doesn't say whether or not they'd find in favor or against the student or the school. It just says, we're punting on this issue. We don't want to deal with it now based on that. That case is still working its way through the court system, and even earlier this year, the district court finally made a decision that the student had a right to sue under Title IX. So that will still be coming through the courts. The other very important case is what I refer to as Boyertown, and that was decided by the Third Circuit in 2018. In that case, the school had a practice of allowing a transgender student to use restrooms and locker rooms based on the gender identity, and that case is from the opposite perspective. That is a case where the students brought a lawsuit against the school, arguing that the school's practice of allowing the transgender students to use the opposite restroom and locker room facilities violated their rights under Title IX and violated the students' constitutional right to bodily privacy. The students argued that the transgender students should be the ones that have to use the single-user, gender-neutral facilities. So the students sought a preliminary injunction in that case to prohibit that school's practice of allowing the transgender students to use the other restrooms. The Third Circuit Court of Appeal upheld the denial of the injunction by the district court and said that the students did not have that likelihood of success on the merits. So they could not prevent the school from allowing that policy to continue. That case is particularly important because the Third Circuit very strongly noted that the students' claim for a right to bodily privacy was not as expansive as they were trying to make it out to be. They noted that the right to privacy is not absolute and is generally less in school restrooms and locker rooms. And they relied on a Supreme Court case that generally noted that high school or school locker rooms are not known for their privacy. So the students also brought a claim alleging violation of Title IX for hostile environment harassment, but the Third Circuit found that the presence of transgender students in restrooms and locker rooms was not severe, pervasive, or offensive to constitute harassment. That case is also notable just because the students petitioned the Supreme Court to review the case, and the Supreme Court denied it. The Supreme Court gets to choose what cases it hears and doesn't, so when it denies that case, it basically says that court's decision stands. So the Supreme Court allowed that court decision stand, saying the school can let transgender students use the opposite restroom. The most important case right now to consider is RG and GR Harris Funeral Homes versus the EEOC. That was a case from the Seventh Circuit, which is currently pending with the U.S. Supreme Court. In that case, an employee of the funeral home was fired after informing the employer that he would be transitioning from male to female. The EEOC brought a discrimination action against the employer under Title VII. And like I said earlier, Title VII, Title IX are analyzed the same. What applies to one is going to apply to the other. So the district court granted summary judgment in favor of the employer, saying that's not discrimination. The Sixth Circuit reversed, holding that the employer's termination of the employee based on transgender status constituted sex discrimination in violation of Title VII. So like I said, the Supreme Court has taken up review of this case, and it's going to determine whether Title VII prohibits discrimination against transgender employees based on a sex stereotyping theory. And again, that's going to apply to Title IX, and that is pending in the Supreme Court right now. They have already heard oral argument, so we are just waiting on that opinion. That is about the most guidance we are going to get on this issue for a long time. It is going to determine what happens. They can either uphold it, and we have to, or they can reverse it, and then we're back to the drawing board on what we have. It would basically invalidate all the case law that says those transgender students have to be allowed access to the restroom. Another notable case that's currently pending is Klug versus Brownsburg School Districts. It's been filed very recently. There's no decision, but in that case, a teacher was terminated for failing to address transgender students by their preferred pronouns. The teacher is claiming religious objections and is suing for reinstatement and an injunction against that policy. But again, it's just been filed this year. There's no decision even in the district court yet, so that's another case we're watching. But that's an overview, a very general overview of Title IX. Whether you agree with it or not, that's not for me or the school board to decide. That's the guidance we have at this point. So That's all I have, and I will turn it over to Lisa from ISBA.
I want to compliment Mr. France and his concise summary of what the law is saying with regard to the rights of transgender students. By way of background, I am general counsel. I am general counsel for the Indiana School Boards Association. We are housed in Indianapolis. We are an advisory organization. We're a not-for-profit advisory organization. I am not the state. I am not an employee of the Department of Education. But what our association does is provide services to school corporations who are members of our association. And right now, every school corporation in the state of Indiana is a member of our association. So specifically my job, as well as we have another attorney on staff, we are available to answer legal questions posed by school administrators, school board members, and attorneys that represent school corporations. So it's my job to be on top of and aware of the legal issues that are facing public school corporations in the state of Indiana. I have been with the association 30 years. I will also share with you that for 19 years, I in fact was a school board member, and I had to sit in that seat and make decisions on behalf of the students who attended the school corporation. So with that background in mind, really, I come to share with you today that this is an issue facing many school corporations in the state of Indiana. This is not isolated. This is not isolated to the northern part of the state, the central part of the state, or the southern part of the state. In fact, I was on the phone this afternoon before coming here with a superintendent and an assistant superintendent regarding the rights of transgender students attending that school corporation. So, as your attorney has shared with you, we have several court decisions, and two in particular, that all Indiana school corporations must be aware of and must follow. And in essence, those decisions just very succinctly say we cannot force a transgender student to use a restroom or a locker room that's consistent with their biological sex. And that is in fact what Evansville did. That was the specific issue. They argued, let's look at the birth certificate and look at the sex of the student as identified on the birth certificate, and that will be the restroom that you use. So it was that specific policy that the Southern District for the state of Indiana rejected and said was a violation of Title IX. So this court decision, as well as the other court decisions that have been shared with you this evening, have required all of us to look differently as to maybe construction of restrooms, the design of restrooms and locker rooms. Perhaps you have even noticed in places of public accommodations, we have a lot more facilities now identifying unisex bathrooms or a bathroom that is open to anyone. So schools, because most of us have restrooms that are designed for female students and restrooms that are designed for male students, we're now looking at the design of those restrooms. And in particular, I guess I would say to you, I think what a lot of schools are looking at is perhaps allowing for or arranging for privacy within that restroom for any student who wishes to use a more private facility. So there are several ways that we have school corporations addressing this issue, and I'm not here to advocate one way or the other. But again, I'm here to share with you that this is a statewide issue that really is causing all of us to look at restrooms and locker rooms differently, and how we design them, how we monitor them, how we perhaps in the future construct restroom and locker room facilities for students who attend our schools. I just would also like to say the state of Indiana requires these board members to take an oath that says they will uphold the laws of the state and of the country. So they must know what Title IX says, and they must know what courts are saying in the state of Indiana. And they must make decisions understanding that they took an oath that said they have to uphold these laws. So, thank you for your time.
So board, if we have questions, now would be the time to ask questions of Mr. France or Ms. Hanson. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, and then we'll have a chance to ask questions at the end. Yeah, so after each of them, right? Yeah. So you'll have a chance.
With
after.
that said, what may be beneficial is somebody put together a little visual about. I said, with that said, we could maybe put a little visual together that explains that, and exactly what we can and can't do, or what you think the law states, or if you just want to restate in a practical manner what you think we can and can't do, I think that would benefit me and maybe other people. Yeah, I mean,
The law is not very clear on what we can prevent. It is very clear that we cannot prohibit transgender students from being forced to only use a restroom based on their biological sex. We cannot say, if you are born female but you are transgender male, you still have to use the female restroom or a gender-neutral restroom. It's not clear what restrictions can be placed other than that. The Evansville case obviously shows that the requirement of changing your birth certificate is a violation of Title IX as well.
Can you clarify what you meant by what we can't prevent?
If a student comes to us and says, I am a boy who, my gender identity is female, and wants to use the female restroom, we have to allow that.
Can a student who is under 18 years old in the state of Indiana declare that themselves, or do their parents have to sign?
It's not clear. But I would say we could require a parent to sign off on that as well. But case law does not address that. Case law does not specifically address that. It doesn't leave us with a lot of answers right now. It's a new developing area of the law, and we're left with very few court decisions that can give us guidance.
I know that there's people, out that you're wanting to ask a question because I see your hands, but I just want you to know for the presentations, the board's going to ask like the board can ask clarifying questions. And then after the presentations, there is a time for public comment where you can share your thoughts with us, but not a time to ask those questions, right? Yeah, because it's a work session for the board is the reason why we're doing it that way. All right, so are there other questions from the board?
May I just supplement what Mr. France said? Of the cases that have come before courts, the student has been struggling with gender identity for several years. And as a general rule, the parents have been supportive of the struggle that their child has been going through. So I think that's why we don't have that definitive answer to what happens if the student says one thing but the parent doesn't necessarily support that. Because thus far, the cases that have been decided, it's just, there's been no question that for years the student has struggled with their gender identity. In some of the cases, the students have begun hormonal treatment to change their identity. But that is a question that many school administrators ask. What about the situation where the student says one thing and the parent isn't supportive of that? So we don't have a clear answer.
Could someone, Jeremy or Teresa, speak to the dollars that we get in terms of Title IX, Title I, the federal money that we get?
Yeah, we actually just checked into that recently, and it was just under $1.3 million that we get in federal funding.
Thank you.
Correct, per year.
Let me rephrase my question a little more specifically, because I want to boil this down from social to what we're doing here in an educational manner, the scope of what we're talking about here. So just to be clear, what if we came, I'm just going to ask specifically, what if we came up with 3 choices? You can't have a choice that's strictly by sex. So if we had a community, we had a traditional, and we had private units, tell me specifically where we are on the law on that, or if we, that's the major question in my mind, because it's not, we're not here to talk, as far as I'm concerned, about anything social. We're talking about an educational, safe, quality educational environment. So that's really, I want to know what options we have to provide. How I see this is, there's basically, I look at voice of the customer, I look at three basically voice of the customers here. People have different colors, some people may not care, but if, from an educational perspective, if we provide choice, I think, right, in basically 3, I call value streams, I want to know where we stand legally on those choices, because we're never going to solve socially. People are different, right? That's the way we were born. So, the social issue is not what we're here to solve. It's that safe, quality educational environment. So, specifically, that's kind of what I'd like to know, is where do we stand with providing those choices? Because other people, I think we have to, I look at all students and we serve all. If we provide those choices, we'll let you do the parenting. Those kids, whatever we have to do legal with choice, you do the parenting, and you talk to your kids as far as what restroom they go in or whatever. But I think, what I'm hearing is we're starting to go up here in the social world. So I just want to pull it back down to what choice, what does the law say about giving the freedom of choice to the student? Because they're really, Dave, you hit on there, they're going to be the ones that choose what restroom they go in. If we whatever we do, if maybe they have, they're going to feel a different way, they'll go in, and you have to have restrictions, because what prevents a kid from toggling back and forth, So those things have to be defined, or it's real hard to make a decision on this.
I think as usual, I'm not 100% clear on your question, but I think I understand where you're coming from the toggling back and forth perspective, that the student cannot flip-flop from day to day what bathroom they want to use.
Okay.
And in the cases, as Lisa said, that the students have had those issues for a long time. And I think we have to provide the choice, but it is the choice for legitimate transgender students, not just the students who are flip-flopping back and forth every day to just
Right.
play the system.
And more specifically, I'm talking about providing choice for facilities in 3 segments, you know, open or community, whoever goes in there, traditional, kind of girls and boys, and then private and there's all kinds of reasons besides gender identity and things like that. People want privacy, you know, so that was more specifically my question is, what are options? If we provide those 3 options, we let the students do the choice, we let the parents do the parenting, is that legal? Just to be more specific?
Don't know if I'd call that more specific, Mike, I'm sorry, but
Okay.
we have to provide that choice if that's what you're getting at. And I think that's what we're doing, but if you want to weigh in.
All right, I'm the newbie. I'll try. How I understand your question, certainly we may maintain restrooms for females, we may maintain restrooms for male students, and we may maintain what we call unisex facilities or private facilities. So certainly, I think what I hear you saying, if we offer all 3 of those choices, are we meeting the law? I would say to you, yes, and what's important to remember is that all students, for instance, would have the choice to use a unisex facility. I think what the courts make clear is that you can't force the transgender student only to use the unisex facility. So you may offer choices, but ultimately the transgender student, according to the court, has the right to say, I want to use the restroom consistent with my gender identity. But that doesn't mean a male student wouldn't have the right to say, I would like to use the unisex facility.
So I think the bottom line is we cannot take choice away from any student, say you have to use this facility only.
Correct.
These buildings are open to the public. Athletic events, this, that, and the other, and I hear a focus here on the students, which is what we're here for. But what happens in a basketball game if a man shows up and says, I identify as a female and I'm going in the women's restroom?
Again, a question that's not currently answered by the courts. So for instance, under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, we have to make all programs, services, and activities accessible to individuals with disabilities. So would Title IX go so far as to say restroom facilities have to be open to adults? Under this, that we can't discriminate on the basis of sex in the restroom when they are open to adults. We do not have an answer to that question. And I would say at this point, because Title IX is what we're talking about, and Title IX involves students, I would take the position that you could insist the restrooms, when open to the public, could still be based on biological sex. I don't know if Mark agrees with me, but that's just speculation on my part.
So would you say that our only option is to make every restroom gender neutral with private stalls? So this senior citizen, if he wants to walk his wife who just had knee surgery all the way to the stall, he can, with a common area between the stalls and the sinks? Would that be an answer to satisfy everyone? Take down all the men's, the women's, the unisex, all the labels. They're all just, from a baby and all the way to a wheelchair. Put all the little hieroglyphics on there, and every one of them is a modified stall.
I can't say it's the only option, but I think it is an option, because if all the restrooms are gender neutral, then there is no
Issue.
prohibition on one sex using one restroom or the other.
Thank you.
I think we got to be careful, though, because a year ago, there was nothing that prohibited that same man from going into the restroom. This policy that we're talking about is for our students during school hours. And if we have to address a separate policy, we can do that. But there was nothing, that could have happened last year, it could happen a year from now. And I think we have to stay focused on what is at hand with transgender students, gender diverse students.
I'll just point out that there's a difference between a practice and a policy, and at this point it's just a practice for us because there is no written policy.
Board, do you have anything else? Ready for the next presentation? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have also had several questions, for IHSAA rules, and he did touch on it a little bit, but Jeremy Markham, our business manager, former athletic director, is here to answer some of those questions.
Thank you. I'm going to read to you the IHSA gender policy as was adopted at their executive committee on June 22nd of 2017, voted in and was approved by a vote of 19-0. A student may only participate on a team of gender which matches the gender of the student at birth, which they determine as birth gender, unless the provision of IHSA Rule 9-9 or IHSA Rule 9-10 apply or as hereinafter provided. And I'll provide you Rule 9-9 in the IHSA rule book states that boys may not participate on girls' teams. For Rule 9-10, girls' participation on boys' teams. Girls may only participate in the girls' sports programs offered by their schools, and boys may only participate in the boys' sports programs offered by their schools. However, during the regular season, 1, if a school has a boys' program in baseball, basketball, football, soccer, or wrestling, but not a comparable girls' program in that sport, and for the purposes of this rule, baseball and softball are not comparable sports, a girl may participate in the boys' program in that sport, provided she follows the boys' contest season rules. But in cross country, golf, swimming and diving, tennis, and track and field, a girl may not attempt to qualify for or participate in the boys' program in that sport. And during the tournament series, if a school has a program in baseball, football, or wrestling, a girl may attempt to qualify for and participate in her school's program in that sport during the tournament series. 2, if a school has a boys program in basketball or soccer, but not a girls program in that sport, a girl may attempt to qualify for and participate in the boys program in that sport during the tournament series. If a school has a boys program in baseball, but not a softball program, a girl may attempt to qualify for and participate in a school's baseball program during the tournament series. But in cross country, golf, swimming and diving, tennis, and track and field, a girl may only attempt to qualify for and participate in the girls' program in that sport during the tournament series. That is Rule 9-10 in the IHSA bylaws. To continue, a student's birth gender may be established by the original birth certificate issued at birth, provided, however, if the birth certificate is unavailable or the birth certificate does not show gender, birth gender can be established by the student's contemporaneous medical records from the birth or other reliable documents and evidence. The IHSA rules do not permit transgender or transsexual, cross-dressing, or similar types of student athletes to participate on a member's school team which is other than the team of the gender which matches the student's birth gender, unless there is a changed gender. A student can demonstrate that the student's birth gender has changed gender, and then participate on a team of the changed gender, but may never later participate on a team of the prior gender, even if the student later transitions to the prior or birth gender. Trans female student athlete, which they abbreviate as MTF, male to female, a student whose birth gender was male and has changed to female can establish the changed gender by the following ways. A, first, the male to female student shall declare that the gender has changed from male to female, that the male to female student intends to participate as a female, that the male to female student understands and agrees that after the male to female student participates on a team of the female gender, that the male to female student may never later participate on a team of the male gender. And B, second, provide reliable medical evidence that 1, the male to female student has undergone sex change before puberty, or the male to female student athlete has undergone sex change after puberty, which should include evidence that surgical the male gender, that the female to male student may never later participate on a team of the female gender. And B, second, provide reliable medical evidence that the female to male student is taking or has completed a regime of medically prescribed testosterone for the purposes of gender transition. This is the IHSA gender policy as of June 22nd, 2017, and only applies to those students 9th grade through 12th grade.
Are there any board questions?
Jeremy, would you explain that they can have that policy because they don't take federal money?
I can't explain why they can have that policy. That's what their executive board determined, and that's their gender policy. I wasn't on that board or that committee, so I can't answer that specifically.
Any other questions? Ready for the next presentation?
Okay, we are going to go ahead and move on to our gender diversity presentation, and we have three. You can go ahead and start making your way up there because I know you have to get your presentation ready. But we have Miss Tammy Tryans. I knew I'd butcher it. I apologize. Licensed clinical psychologist at the Allen County Bowen Center. We have Mr. Jason Cousins from a local community mental health representative and a director of the Wabash County Bowen Center. And Mr. Joel Mackin, local community health, mental health representative and assistant director of therapy and medical at the Wabash County Bowen Center. They're here to give us their presentation.
So thank you so much for inviting me. So when I started to put this presentation together, I kind of thought about, can't hear me? Is that better? Okay. So I wanted to think about what is common with all people in the room. And I think that we all want what's best for kids. We want our kids to be safe. I'm a mom, I want my kids to be safe. And so I'm hoping to just provide some education to help maybe start to put some of these anxieties to rest, or at least start to kind of talk through them. Is it working? There we go. Okay. So this is going to be a very whirlwind presentation. So try and bear with me. It's a lot. And if you take nothing else away from today, it's that this is a complicated topic and it can be confusing because the language we have doesn't do a very good job of allowing us to differentiate sex and gender. So I'm just gonna start with a few definitions to make sure we're all on the same page. So gender is really the characteristics that are given to males and females by the social culture, okay? Like we think girls pink, boys blue, girls love to be princesses and they love butterflies, and boys love trucks. And this can change from culture to culture, and it's changed in our culture over time. Biological sex is just that, it's our biological sex. And sexual orientation, which I'm not going to touch on today, is not the same thing as gender identity. Cisgender. Cisgender means that your gender identity matches the sex you were assigned at birth. So the doctor looked at me and said, Tammy is a female, and I identify as a female. That's cisgender. Transgender means that there's a mismatch there. They looked at me and they said, Tammy's a girl. And I'm like, that doesn't fit for me. Being transgender is not always visible, so we don't want to assume what somebody's gender identity is. It's an adjective, a transgender person, not a noun. Genderqueer, non-binary, and gender fluid can be grouped very similarly together, meaning that they don't necessarily identify as transgender, but somewhere on the spectrum between male and female. This is not an exhaustive list, and different words sometimes mean different things to different people. And the language is changing all the time. Okay, I know that this is a big slide, and you probably can't read it. But what I want to talk about, and what is really important here, is thinking about gender and sex going beyond XX and XY. So if we think about back when we were young and we were learning math, what do we teach kids? 1 + 1 is 2. And then you go on every year and you teach more complicated topics. and you find out that there's geometry and trigonometry, and you keep going, and then there's algebra. And sooner or later, somebody in a doctorate program is looking at differential calculus. And we don't necessarily, like, I don't know differential calculus, but it doesn't mean that it's not there, and it doesn't mean it's not real. It's the same way with gender and biology. So we teach kids that there's two. We teach them that there's men and women. But the truth is way more complex than that, because we know that sex is determined by hormones, by chromosomes, genes, and our genitalia, as well as internal organs. But that's not necessarily what a doctor sees when they look at you. Sorry, my mouth is really dry. So you can be assigned female or male, but on this list, way over here in the corner, on each side, those are the, thank you. Those are the categories. Thank you. This is where you have male, chromosomes, genes, hormones, and sexual characteristics of the body, and the same on the other side. But everything else in the middle is not. So there's way more biological diversity than we even think about. You can have XXXY, you can have XXY, you can have XYY, you can have XXX. So just because we teach kids that there are male and female doesn't mean that we can't go on to teach with more complexity and scientific accuracy. So I want to talk about for a second what is assigned sex. This is often given to us by a doctor, and it is not necessarily accurate. Because we have intersex conditions, and
I know what a male and female is. This is ridiculous.
Hey, Ms. Truins, will you go ahead and continue your presentation?
from where I was or from where we asked? Right here? Sure. Okay. So, when I was a kid and I was in school, what did I think about? I thought about, am I getting good grades? Am I going to get into a good school? How's my family going to pay for it? Or maybe I wasn't getting along with my mom because I'm a teenager and I fight with my mom. But it's different for LGBT youth. They think about lack of family acceptance, family rejection, bullying at school, fear of being out or outed to others, and eating disorders, self-harm, depression, and suicide. So when you think about kids in K through 12 settings, that's a lot on kids. And it has consequences for mental health, for physical health, for educational attainment, and their sense of personal safety. So, in studies, key findings in K-12 education is that 78% of transgender students or gender nonconforming students reported harassment by students, teachers, or staff. 35% reported physical assault. 12% reported sexual assault. 84% said they don't feel safe at school. And 42% reported physical threats. And this can have negative effects. It is hurtful and it hurts them. So currently there's 20 states and Washington, D.C. that explicitly prohibit harassment and bullying of students based on gender identity. And some of these have been in place for a very long time, 10 years or more. And some of these school districts serve up to 700,000 students in a year. So that's a lot of data. And what do we know? School boards and staff say there's no evidence that letting transgender people use bathroom facilities that align with their gender identity increases safety risks. 300 of the nation's leading sexual assault and domestic violence prevention organizations say protecting transgender students does not compromise safety in restrooms. Police, there's no increase in public safety incidents in cities and states with non-discrimination laws. And school officials, trans-supportive policies have not created problems. No problems from trans students, and no attempts by other students to be dishonest or break the rules. So what does that mean? Very often when we try to make changes, they're scary, right? Because we don't know what to expect. But some of these hypothetical situations, they're just not supported by the data. People aren't going into bathrooms that don't align with their gender identity. They just aren't. So language matters. It shapes our reality and conveys unspoken assumptions. And you can also, language can be powerful, and you can change language to change culture. And our language evolves and changes. And so when we speak about people, we want to use the language that they use for themselves. And using that language is a central way to show support to trans people and to give them the support that they need to do well and succeed. So I want to talk about pronouns. So let's think about asking for someone's name. What do we know about names? You can't tell by looking at it, and you have to, if you want to know, then you have to ask. Maybe not the person, but someone that they know. And names are treated as facts. So if I tell you my name is Tammy, then you believe me, my name is Tammy. And each person is the expert. And some names are hard to pronounce, like my last name. But messing up is okay. I'll take anything close, because I understand that my name is pronounced in a kind of a crazy way. And people sometimes change their names. My dad, my uncle, my grandfather all go by their middle names. My niece, whose name is Sabrina, uses Jeannie. And that's okay. So we do a good job of remembering names because we've been taught that that's important. So what if we treated pronouns the same way? So hi, my name is Tammy, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Then you know So it becomes another way to have a unique way to identify yourself. So usually when I give this presentation, I have people pair up or get in small groups and ask them to tell a story that doesn't use gendered language. I can't do that today, but usually they have quite a bit of trouble. Hey, you guys, gendered language. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, gendered language. So we don't want to assume that we know. We could say, hello, everyone, or hello, how are you today? And if you make a mistake, then we apologize and we move forward. So if I was to say to somebody who used they, them pronouns to somebody else, and I was talking to Joel, and I was like, oh, she lives in, pardon me, they live in Fort Wayne. You move on and you keep going. Don't do helpful tips. And these, I think, sometimes we think we're helping. Like, oh, if you wore makeup, you'd just be so much prettier. Or, I would have never known that they were trans. And we want to make trans folks feel welcome in our community and in our schools. There's lots of ways to educate about gender. And an easy way for young children is to talk about there are lots of ways to be a boy or a girl, and that gender is determined by our body, our heart, and our mind. And someone's appearance doesn't tell you what's inside, but most of all, everyone deserves respect. So some commonly voiced concerns are that students are being harassed. They are. Transgender and gender nonconforming students are being harassed. You may hear there's no third gender option, but there is intersex that captures a whole range and spectrum of people. People may say transition does not prevent suicide, and that's true, but for kids who have strong family and social support, that number is cut almost in half. And the suicide rate for transgender folks, whether you're a youth, an adult, hovers around 41%. 41, that's almost half. The national average is 4%, and for teens, it's 10%. Yep. Some people say that maybe people don't understand the difference between self-harm and suicide and that the number's inflated. But self-harm is usually done not to kill yourself, but is a way of expressing your pain in a physical way. Whereas suicide, you are trying to end your life. And I read also that people say there's methodology problems with the studies being used to come to these figures, but there's flaws in every study, and we always talk about it. It's part of how you write research. And so that would be in there. We can only draw so many conclusions. We can only say so many things with the data and the results that we found. So trans kids really do face an uphill battle at school, in our communities, but our collective obligation is to respect and recognize the humanity of all people. And it's our job as parents and community members to ensure all children feel valued and loved. That's all.
I guess I'm a little unclear. Are the other two of you, is there more to the presentation, or is that the whole?
That's it.
Okay. So board questions.
I don't really have a question more than just a statement. Is again, what our responsibility is a safe, quality educational environment. We're, you know, so as, we're an educational, you know, if people are wondering what we're doing here, we are an educational institution, right? So, I mean, this is to educate people on maybe the other side of the issue and et cetera. But at the same time, you know, I just want to make sure we stay in scope of what we're talking about here. We're not here to solve social issues. We're here to provide a safe, quality educational environment. Well, all theatrics, you know, that stuff's not going to help any of us. You know, if the people are always going to be on opposite sides, and if we, you know, you're going to have to really come together. You know, we're going to have to find common position on this thing. So, you know, that's just a statement. I understand the education part on this, but again, I just want to make sure we stay in scope of what we're here to solve, you know, or what we're here to get your ideas about. And if you're not in the room, you know, how do we get your ideas? You know, would be my question to those that left. So.
I'm not sure. I'd like to see it again, but one or two slides back, I think you said that these kids face harassment and that, but then the other slide where you talked about the police departments and all, you know, the other slide said that there was no increase. So I guess I'm confused. You know, I got to believe that they're harassed and bullied.
Yeah.
So, is there increase or not?
So on that side of the issue is speaking specifically to people who identify as cisgender or problems with cisgender kids not feeling safe. So those incidents, the incidents of bullying and harassment, they are there, but they didn't increase by protecting trans kids. And people aren't being dishonest in trying to get in the restrooms by protecting trans kids.
Thank you.
Anything else, guys? Everybody okay? We're good.
Just want to take this time really quickly to thank our presenters for this evening, everyone that was here that presented. We really appreciate your expertise as well as the time and effort that you put in to helping us become more well-informed and have better conversations. Before we get ready to take public comments, I would just like to share what our office has been working on behind the scenes to put the process in place. Our practice with students who are experiencing complexities with gender identity are reviewed on a case-by-case basis and work with counselors and principals to develop a gender support plan. Students who do not go through this process and choose to use a restroom other than one that matches their sex assigned at birth will be disciplined. We are reviewing alternative restroom and locker room facilities, or actually locker room alternatives and restroom alternatives are available for any student that feels uncomfortable in any situation or any restroom. And our administration is investigating the possibility of the restroom renovations. You heard the questions here this evening, and those are based on numerous other school corporations across the state and what they have been doing up to this point, and that is including looking at individual restroom stalls. This evening was created so we as a community, a board, and a staff can come together to express our concerns as well as produce outcomes that are within the parameters that were given to us here this evening. The format being used will be small groups with board members and administrators so that we can take the time to truly listen at length. We'll also have a brief time of public comments to the entire board. However, the purpose of this meeting is to inform the board regarding gender diverse students and move forward towards outcomes. The board will not be fielding questions as we move forward with the public comments or small groups. If you have handouts or anything that you would like the board to get, make sure you just give them to them during your group participation part. We will share that information with all board members. Please know that we have had numerous requests to do the right thing. However, the right thing depends on what perspective you are looking at. There are varying opinions on what that is. So tonight is an opportunity for us all to work together and truly become Squire strong. Not just say that we are, but truly what it means to live it out and be Squire strong. At this point, we're going to turn it over to Mrs. Ayers, and she's going to talk about public comment process.
All right, so we've asked that if you're going to speak, that you would sign up to do that. So if you haven't signed up for public comment, and there, I think the last count was 46 or 48. So if you haven't, if you would do that right now, Mr. Self is in the back and you can see him. So please see him because you do need to be signed in to speak. We ask that you would come to one of the mics in the front of the room and that you would share your name before you start speaking. Please speak into the mic because that's how we get the recording and so everyone can hear. You'll have one opportunity to speak for 90 seconds, and I know that's not a long time, but there's several people who want to speak, and we do want to get to the small groups. As Mr. Hensley said, theatrics don't really bring us together, so we're asking for no applause after speaking. We also are asking for no repeat comments. If the comments are becoming repetitive, then we're going to move on to the small group discussions. Please be respectful in your tone and words. Disrespectful or derogatory comments regarding individuals will not be tolerated. You'll be asked to step away from the mic if you choose to insult, degrade, or harass others. And I'd like to remind everybody that for this portion of the meeting, or for the whole evening, the board is here to listen, so we will not be responding to questions. The process for this, are you going to All right, so when you step up to the microphone, then Mr. Self is going to just check your name, and we can make are we making lines? And we can just make lines at both microphones, and then Mr. Self or Mr. Baldwin will mark you off. So if you want to speak, please go ahead and come up to the mic. Is Mark timing? And Mr. Markham is going to be timing for us tonight.
Hi, everybody. My name's Crystal Pressel. Some of you know me. I'm a local massage therapist.
Wait, time out. I can't hear.
Okay, sorry. Good. I'm Crystal Pressel. I've been here in the community for about 5 years. I have a child that's currently in the school system and one that's only 16 months old. I've lived outside of Indiana for a decade out of my life. I lived in Las Vegas, of all places. So I've seen how this affects society in general, but my main concern is the what ifs. We might be trying to accommodate a small percentage of our student body, which is awesome, and I think that we should move forward with that, but it's always those few individuals, the 5% of humanity, that take advantage of an opportunity, and then we have to deal with the aftermath. And that's not something I'm willing to put my child at risk for. I have nothing against any students that are transgender and are really going through this struggle. My concern is the what if. If there's going to be bathroom monitors, fantastic. I don't see how we can monitor every bathroom and every student all the time. But there are going to be opportunities because we have hormone-driven children that, something might happen. We just don't know. And is that something that we really want to put out there for it to go ahead and happen before we have a change of heart? Do we really want somebody's child to be sexually harassed or violated before we really reconsider this? It's my only concern. If you guys have kids that are actually going through, gender reassignment or confusion or whatever, I'm sorry. That sucks because kids are awful. Kids are awful even to their own adults.
Time.
So, okay.
I'm Chad Duffy, and everybody in this community that knows me, I'm very conservative. But I'm just going to talk on a couple things. I just want to ask the attorney up there real quick, a couple questions.
So you know, I'm not responding to questions, just like the board.
Okay, so I'll just say, none of these cases have been to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court actually talked about the Gavin Grimm case and sent it back down, and they denied a couple other cases. And Congress has not enacted a law. So Title IX basically says about sexual harassment. So it becomes into the interpretation of sexual harassment. President Obama gave a letter to the colleagues, is what it's called, about that it included transgender. When President Trump was elected, he rescinded that. So it's based on what the interpretation of sexual harassment means. And you guys talked about the federal money from Title VII and Title IX, and the government can withhold Title IX funds if you disregard Title IX, but they can't not withhold Title VII funds at the same time. So that number of federal funding needs to be separated. And then also, one of the things that I want to say, which is going to be, I'm more libertarian than conservative, and this is going to sound really strange. I kind of did my homework. I went and met with the MES principal. I made inquiries at MIS and inquiries at the high school.
Time.
That's not good. This is really good. Just let me talk for 2 more seconds. All right. All right, there. Here we go. Yeah, this is parliamentary, right? I mean, this is. Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is.
Hey, Chad, will you just give me a minute, please?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do we allow it?
You guys have parliamentary rules, right?
I'm sorry. Okay, Chad.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, I'm not really concerned about the elementary school because the bathrooms have private stalls with doors. It's not a big deal. And Title IX also says that you have to let the other students have a private bathroom if they request it. So my daughter can request to go to a private bathroom if she doesn't feel comfortable with the new rule. So I'm fine with that. MIS is pretty much the same. The problem becomes when you get to high school and now you have locker rooms where people don't have any clothes on. That's a separation. That's a difference. So I think the whole thing, you know, if we can get to an area to where we can redo the high school to make separate shower areas for the kids that don't want to participate in the transgender full bathroom idea, then this is a null and void issue. It's over. Let's move on. It's over. You know, as long as my daughter is safe and she has the opportunity to go to a separate bathroom, the problem's solved. You know, discriminate against my daughter, I don't care. Let her use her own private bathroom. It's fine. So, there it is.
My name is Andy Eberly. I've grown up in this community, and I just wrote a brief one-page letter, so I'll try to hurry. Dr. Grimeau, MCS School Board, and school staff. My wife, Casey, and I presently have 5 children enrolled in Manchester Community Schools, which include 3 daughters and 2 boys. In fact, we have representation at all 3 schools with 2 children in MES grades kindergarten and 3rd, 1 at MIS in 6th grade, and 2 at Manchester Junior Senior High School in 8th and 11th grades. We love this town, this community, and have always appreciated and supported our kids' teachers and the public education that they provide. However, we are very concerned about the safety and privacy of our children as it relates to the current bathroom policy or lack thereof. We are for the rights, privacy, and safety of all children. We believe that our schools need to provide a safe environment for all students. This means our daughters and our sons should be able to access bathrooms and locker rooms without fear of the opposite sex coming in. A quote, open door policy that allows any student to enter the bathroom and locker room of their identified gender does not protect our kids. Even if it is a pre-qualified or guidance counselor approved transgender student, as you made comments at the last board meeting, no biological male should ever be in the same bathroom as my daughters, period. While a transgender student may not
Time.
be a threat, while a transgender student may not be a
Okay,
threat.
I'm
in and
sorry,
of
Andy,
themselves-
can you just give me a minute here, okay? So I just, I'm just confused. I thought we said a 90-second rule.
Yeah, the crowd does not get to decide if he gets extra time or not. If somebody wants to give him their time,
I'll take Nate Gephardt's time. He signed up to speak, and I think he's gone.
Jeremy, restart it.
While a transgender student may not be a threat in and of themselves, allowing them in the bathroom or locker room facilities of the opposite sex invades the privacy rights of other students. Furthermore, this type of policy potentially opens the door for sexual predators to take advantage of our kids, which has been proven experientially in communities that have adopted this type of policy. This begs the question, should a transgender student be forced to use a bathroom or locker room of a gender that he or she does not identify with? Absolutely not. Because putting a transgender student in a bathroom or locker room that they don't identify with is not safe and does not protect that student. Is it discrimination to have separate facilities for a transgender student? Absolutely not. Just like it is not discrimination to provide a separate facility for a handicapped student to accommodate their special needs. The answer to protect the rights, privacy, and safety of all students is the following. Allow biological boys only to use male bathroom and locker room facilities. Allow biological girls only to use female bathroom and locker room facilities. Allow transgender students to use safe and lockable bathroom and locker room facilities. This solution protects the rights, privacy, and safety of all children. Please let reason prevail. This does not violate any federal or state laws and is a defensible solution for our schools. I understand Mr. France put
Time.
together those arguments, but it's not a law.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Jewel Flitcraft. I'm an instructor at the collegiate level, and a couple of things I'd like to mention is a lot of the arguments are sounding like when we used to have segregation between black and white bathrooms because black people, I'm speaking, because black people supposedly had diseases and other things, okay? So there is no proven fact that transgender individuals are sexual predators. Okay, you are more likely to be violated, assaulted, and raped by someone over the age of 30 who you know, that's a relative or a teacher. There are more cases of teacher-student relationships than there are people being attacked in the bathroom. And I think we're forgetting what the bathroom is for. Right? I'm pretty sure when I have to go, I'm going to go whether it says men, women, family, baby, community, because I'm going to pee down my leg if I don't. It really doesn't make a difference. Parents need to educate their children in regards to sexuality, what the body is, and surprise, we were all born starting out as females. Yeah, did you know that? Because the body, the clitoris, grows
Time.
into a penis. Oh! I think you guys need to go back to 8th grade biology.
All right.
I believe that God made humans
All right.
and that they were created through that process. Adam and Eve, God did.
All right.
Go
Thank you.
read a book, folks, other than the Bible.
In making your comments, please address the board and not the crowd.
Hello, my name's Kimberly Poehler, and I have a really bad voice tonight. But one thing I want to say is I'm thankful that we live in America where we're so free and we have the right to come here and express our differences, and it's okay for us to be different. It's not about a hate, and I know you see I'm wearing white, and I know there was comments made about all the people that wore white. We're not about hate. We're about protecting our children and the transgender children. It's not about what your choice is in belief and ours. The only difference is, I think the school was wrong for none of us knowing what was going on. I have children in the school. I am the parent, and so is everyone else here. That was wrong. We should have known what was going on. Now, as I say that, why can't we do a male bathroom for a male boy that is biologically by his certificate of birth when he came out of the womb, a female bathroom for a girl, and then if we're gonna have transgender and they identify that a male is gonna be a female, make 4 bathrooms. One for the guys that think they wanna be girls, and one for the girls that wanna be guys. You've created all the resolve there and that, and it has to be documented at the time they sign up for school. Now you have no transgenders going into a boy's bathroom or a girl's bathroom. There's no accusations, and there's no room for question. I don't understand why this is so difficult. We need to come together as a community because it's putting a division.
Time.
Thank you for your time.
My name's Nancy Kripe, and I've lived 59 years in this community, minus 6 that I lived elsewhere, but I've been deeply rooted in the community. So I want to say, and I went through Manchester Community Schools. I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be educated and for people to speak about this. I think that's really important. And what I want to speak to is that I think all of us need education, or at least most of us do, myself included. I was taught, like everybody else, that gender was a very binary, simplistic thing, male, female, and that was it. And when I first encountered transgender identity, probably, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, my thinking then on it was very simplistic also. And I was uncomfortable with it. And the idea of being in bathrooms with somebody who, you know, had different genitalia than me made me uncomfortable. But as I have listened to the voices of trans people and heard their stories, boy, have I changed. And that's what I hear here tonight. So if you hear trans people, listen to their voices, listen to their stories, it brings greater understanding and it alleviates a lot of anxiety. I just am in a completely different place with it today, and I still continue to learn. I want to continue to learn. I hope we all do. It is not a simplistic thing. The other thing I want to say just very briefly is when I was in bathrooms, I wasn't looking at anybody's genitals. When I was in a locker room, I wasn't looking at anybody's genitals. Even if I could have, I wouldn't have. We had boundaries. I mean, people have a sense of personal space and boundaries. Most of us don't, even in a shared locker room with people that we very clearly identify with as being our same gender.
Time.
Don't stare at each other's genitals.
Go ahead.
My name is Jim Smith. I'd like to commend Mark and... Can you hear me now? Yep. My name's Jim Smith. I'd like to commend Mark and Lisa for their presentations this evening. I'd also like to commend the superintendent, the board, and the business manager for having this evening. I'm not totally educated regarding this issue, but I've learned a lot tonight, and I really appreciate that. I believe that no board or administrator is going to make any decision lightly. I believe that those responsible with setting policy have thoroughly researched this issue, have listened to the advice of experts, and have struggled with making a decision. As a community, we need to trust that every aspect has been taken into consideration and that decisions have been made affording respect for everyone. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Jessie Miles. I am an educator in public schools. I have been for 11 years. I have 5 kids. And as a public school educator, we have gone through trauma training, you know, throughout various years, different certifications that we have to take. And we work very hard on focusing on education, as was talked about by the board. And we focus on creating a safe space for all students. When there's students in our population, such as our trans community, who are afraid and choose not to use restrooms at school, 65% of our trans youth choose not to use restrooms at all day at school, just fear of what could happen to them in the restroom. That's trauma, and we have to think about education for these students. of if you have to go and you're holding it for 8 hours, 9 hours a day, depending on how long your bus ride is, that's all you can think about. And you can't think about learning, math, English, passing ISTEP tests. It's trauma that they're going through, just focusing just on the restrooms, not talking about all the other things such as pronouns and chosen names and things like that. So speaking about restrooms is part of education, and we do need to focus on that and make it a safe place for all students. Thank you.
My name's Shad Roth. I have a daughter that is in Manchester Elementary School right now. In hearing the information presented tonight, it appears that the way that Title IX is being interpreted by the courts, it leaves little option for schools. And that's unfortunate, but I think we need to look at the available options that we have legally. Safety is my main concern for all students at the school, and it seems to me that as a community, as a school, we need to generate the money, the funding that it would take to make separate individual facilities for every single student, even though that would be an incredibly large financial sum of money. I think that is the most fair, the most realistic way that we can make every student safe. It's going to appease both sides of the aisle. It's going to appease every student, and every student is going to have the same opportunity to use that single-use facility, whether it's a restroom, whether it's a changing facility, whether it's a shower. It's just an option. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christina Inskeep. I attended high school near here in Warsaw many years ago. I am the mom of a transgender son. I also have 4 other children, and when he told us he was transgender, my first concern was for his safety. I know all of us parents and all of us educators and board members are concerned about safety. His safety was in my mind the priority, because so many transgender people are harassed and misunderstood, and actually they're just people just like us. It's just some of us are born with red hair, some of us are born with blonde hair, brown hair. It's just one of those things that I didn't know anything about before our son told us about it. It was a steep learning curve. I learned a lot in the last 7 years, and I've heard the voices of transgender people who suffer greatly because they don't feel like they can use the facilities or go through life without being harassed. So as all of you want safety for your children, we want safety for ours as well. And there's no increased incidence of, there's no documented, I think you were asking Mr. Turflinger about the police a statistic on there. And what I read was that police in all these different cities have said there has been no documented occasions where a transgender person harassed anybody in a bathroom. I believe that was the statistic. Thank you.
My name's Casey Eberly. My husband was just up here, and I want to address the privacy part of it. I do think there's security that we need, privacy and safety, but I have 3 girls, and I'm sorry I'm emotional about it. I don't have a problem with the transgender, but I have a problem with when my daughter goes to change in the locker room, that she has to change in front of a transgender, and that's what's that's okay because that's what the policy says. That's really hard for me to explain that to my girls, and in fact to just say, well, I mean, if that's what the policy is, then I could just pick 3 boys out of the, that say they're transgender. I mean, we definitely have to have a lot of things set in place, but the bottom line comes down to the privacy of my daughters. I don't believe that a transgender is a harm to my daughter. That's not my concern. My concern is that my daughters are very private, and they will hardly undress in front of me, their mother. So I'm telling them then that the school policy says that they have to undress in front of a boy that identifies as a girl, and I just don't feel that that is right. I definitely think there needs to be a private facility for her to go to. But my question here is for you guys, what do we do right now? What do we do until those facilities are available?
Time.
Being the tallest one in the room, I'm a transplant to North Manchester.
Hey, would you state your name?
Who do I want to be today? I'm going to be myself, Teresa Anderko. I'm a transplant to North Manchester, Indiana. I came to Manchester College 30 years ago, fell in love with this town. That was part of my letter I wrote to the board, which I never sent. All of us here have an issue with privacy and dignity. And I think Mr. France said it very well when he said common sense. And when we listen to each other, I have to wonder how much common sense has come in. I also have to wonder how we are charging our school personnel, namely a counselor who chose to leave the room at a heightened moment. I addressed 2 members of Manchester Community Schools administration and 1 board member recently with regard to some posts that were put out on social media because it violates privacy. It also encourages people to have private conversations, which, as we all know, tend to stir the pot. So we appreciate an opportunity to come together as a community, all of us a community, regardless of what color our shirt is or what color our skin is. I don't know what else to say, but I hope at the end of the day that we all have some common sense and we all have some dignity and that we all can look at each other in the mirror and be proud of who we are. And if we have young people, be proud of who we're raising. I'm not sure we all can do that today, but I hope maybe
Time.
tomorrow we can.
My name is Haley Hand. My husband Chase and I have 4 children, and one of our daughters is affected by special needs. She is nonverbal and intellectually disabled. According to the U.S. Justice Department, she is 7 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than her peers within the normal intellectual range, as per the data provided to the NPR. I had a conversation with one of your principals. I was informed that students would have to comply with a 2 to 3 step process and have parents sign off on a request before permission would be granted to the said student to use the opposite sex's facilities. My daughter cannot defend herself. When students fail to comply with this 2 to 3 step process, how will my daughter be safe when the school is afraid of discriminating against a child that says he wants to use the other restroom? According to what today's meeting complied of, I think it's safe to say that you guys are considering a unisex facility. In the UK, where the transgenderism push is super prevalent, according to the Sunday Times from a September 2018 article, 2/3, that's 2/3 of sexual attacks occur in unisex facilities. How will females be safe in this atmosphere? How will my daughter be safe?
Time.
My name is Russ Rehard, and I think the board was sent a letter from Alliance Defending Freedom, and the lawyers there have reminded that Title IX is a simple statement for equality in sports for boys and girls. And the Obama chose to make it about transgender opportunities. But they have a model policy, a page and a half, that students use the restroom that they were born with, and that would protect all of the students, and especially visitors into our community schools for sports events that could claim a gender identity and allow pedophiles into our bathrooms who claim a gender identity. And it would not be safe for those students. So if you would consider that policy by Alliance Defending Freedom, they would be even likely to help defend that in the future if necessary. But the privacy of our students is far more important. And accommodation is allowed for individuals that, transgender students that need a private restroom for themselves.
Okay, my name is Dawn Burns. I'm not even really sure what I'm going to say now that I'm standing up here. I think, probably echo everything that Nancy a while ago said, and the mother of the transgender son. I'm a mother. I have a son who's genderqueer. He's on his own journey. It's not my story to share, but I know what it feels like to be the mother of a child who's figuring out exactly who they are in the world and what that looks like. It's very hard for me to, and I understand protection of kids, and we want all our kids to be safe, and I hear the voices from this side, okay? I really hear that. But it's very difficult to hear transgender used as a noun, those transgenders, or this idea that they're sexual predators and it's assault and all of these sorts of things, because it's just not, it's not true. I came from a family where I hid my own sexual orientation for 40 years because it was very clear that I would be going to hell and that I was an abomination. And I've had students in my classrooms who come from those environments and have heard those things about themselves, and they are struggling just to be themselves and to be happy and to feel safe.
Time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Chris Metzger, and I just need some clarity as to whether precedent is law, or if you're telling us that Title IX is vague enough for interpretation from many different people, how then is this school system going to interpret that law via the lawyer that you have? And how can precedent be counted as law and you function under precedent as if it is law? How can you clarify that as you go through this process? Each individual person up there, how in your mind do you clarify that, and how is that going to look for you as you create policy? As I understand, there is no policy, there's just practice. So if there's just practice, then when does the practice stop until there is policy? That would be my next question.
Hi, I'm Trisha Beal. I have 3 students at MES and MIS. I did send a letter to the school board and Dr. Grimeau and the principals earlier. I don't have time to read all of that, but that is, my full feelings. Just a few highlights, though. I would say I'd ask that you would look at other schools in our area and what policies they're putting in place. And also, again, the Alliance Defending Freedom Fund, the policy that they've sent to the school, and also the child and parental rights letter, that those would all be considered. Some of those cases were mentioned, but they take a different spin on them and talk about the differences that apply to our school system. And also, I just want to, as an example, practical example, my daughter, when she was in 4th grade, they go to the pool for a week, they do swim lessons, they change in their separate locker rooms. Some kids change in stalls, some kids change out in the open. So if there's a transgender student that is in my daughter's class, then all of a sudden she's exposed to a naked male body in 4th grade, 10-year-olds, and we think this is acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable, and I'm her parent. And of course, this could happen at the high school level also. I also I just want to point out that I think this was upsetting to the parents because, one, I feel the letter was misleading in stating that this was law when it's really interpretation of case law. And also,
Time.
And then it looks to me like this will be our last one.
My name is April White. First of all, I'm not super eloquent, so bear with me. I'm the parent of 2 children in the Manchester Community Schools, and the issue of locker rooms, because my kids aren't in high school yet, gave me pause. That was something I needed to think about. What do we do at that level? And I will tell you, I don't know that any of us have the answer that will make all of us happy. I don't know that we can get there tonight. I don't know that we can get there ever. But the locker room issue in particular for me, I learned recently from school personnel that students don't shower in the schools. That's not a requirement for PE. And even changing their clothing is not required. And so for me, that feels like a non-issue. If they don't have to shower and they don't have to change their clothes, then there isn't that. And even if they do change their clothes, certainly they shouldn't be changing their undergarments. And most trans children are so concerned about exposure that they are extremely discreet. And my guess would
Time.
be, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonna Michael, and I've lived in this community for quite a while now. And I have 4 children. And 3 of them are currently in Manchester Community Schools. I have 2 in elementary and 1 in middle school. And I know everybody's talking about, girls being affected by it. My 13-year-old boy actually came home to me the other day and confronted me about it and said, Mom, I understand that they have rights because we're very strong in the LGBT community because of my nieces and stuff. And he has been present his whole life in the situation. And he came home and goes, Mom, am I going to be forced to go to the bathroom with a girl, or are they going to be allowed to see me change in front of them? So even trying to talk to my 13-year-old about something like that, I'm thinking, how am I going to talk to my 6-year-old about something like this? In the school systems, they don't talk about sex ed until later in school for a big reason, and that is because they're not mature enough mentally to understand all of that. You guys bring people in and teach them that it's not okay for another man or female to see their bodies other than their family or a doctor. And now you're telling them that it's okay? I don't understand that. What are you trying to tell my child? Are you teaching them that one thing's okay, but now it's not? So to me, that's confusing to me, let alone them. I think if you can put up a thing to try to put up a multi-million-dollar facility for sports, I think you could do different bathrooms.
Time.
All right, and this is truly going to be the last comment.
Hi, I'm Samantha Alley. I just wanted to read a portion of the North Manchester non-discrimination policy, public access to facilities, programs, activities, services that was signed by our town manager on 9/7/2016, stating that regardless of receiving federal funds, the town of North Manchester prohibits discrimination and or the exclusion of individuals from employment or participation opportunities, its municipal facilities, programs, activities, and services not only based on the individual person's race, color, national origin, disability, sex, age, low income status, or limited English proficiency, but also individual person's religion, citizenship status, military status, genetic information, and any other category protected under federal, state, or local law. Further, respective of whether sexual orientation or transgender status are legally protected statuses, the town does not tolerate discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or transgender status. Thank you.
All right, so we just would like to, on behalf of the board, like to thank the community. We are grateful to be part of an involved community, and we're thanking you for taking the time to be here and engage in respectful conversation. We do believe that the strongest relationships are forged when we learn to listen and work together to find solutions that honor all people. The board would also like to thank Mr. France and Ms. Hansel for their presentations tonight, and we're grateful for the clarity they provide in legal manners. Also would like to thank them for their accessibility and guidance they've given throughout this situation. And thank you to the Bowen Center for your presentations. Because of the presentations, I feel like we're better able to make informed and wise decisions. The board would also like to thank the work of Dr. Grimeau and Manchester Community School administrators, teachers, and support personnel. We know that the last few weeks have brought extra time to process thoughts and emotions. Thank you for endlessly listening and working to honor different opinions. We appreciate the way you continue to find the common ground in a situation that has opposing viewpoints on what is right. Thank you for being on the front lines and loving every child in our schools and constantly providing a safe learning environment. We know this is always your priority. And so we're going to move now to something that I'm really looking forward to, and that's the small group format. So Dr. Grimeau is going to share those norms and procedures with us.
Yes, please stick around for this because this is really the reason for the meeting, is trying to figure out what our outcomes are and how we move forward from here. So everyone, I think, is getting a color card out there, and if you want to speak and be part of a group. So make sure you take that color card and match it up with a board member and an administrator. The groups will meet. There'll be 3 of them in this room, 2 of them out in our lobby, 1 of them in our boardroom, and 1 down the hallway there that will be in the media center. You will need to take your chair with you, so just fold it up and go so you can make your own groups when you get there. Board members, again, and our administrators are not here to answer questions. They're just here to listen, and hopefully we can gain some really good information about what we do and how we go from here. So one of the things I do want to mention is recording of our groups. Conversations is prohibited unless everybody in that group decides it's okay to do. So please make sure that you're not recording conversations on the phones there. And we're looking to wrap those up within 30 minutes. So please feel free to move on after you go to your group. Make sure you're listening to others' opinions. The same norms stand there that they are here, that you're being disrespectful or anything, and we will ask you to be uninvited from that group. So we will develop frequently asked questions from all of this. And so if you do have questions, that is the time to really ask them, and we'll record them, try to get you some answers, and we will post those online. Thank you for caring enough to be here, to be informed, be involved in this process, and we really appreciate your input. We'll go ahead and break up in those groups now. Thank you.
Are we supposed to take our chairs too?